I got my radio voice on.
You see, I got my radio mic here.
The mic is amazing. You sound, out of everyone that I've spoken to, you sound the best. What is that?
So this setup costs about $300 or $400, and I highly recommend exactly what I've got.
What have you got going on?
So I've got something called a Zoom pod track, and feeding into it, I've got a Heil PR40 dynamic mic.
What the fuck is that?
Yeah, exactly. It's fucking good is what it is. But it's not all that expensive. It's just a really nice mic for radio.
That cost me $40. Do you hear me well?
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Do you hear me like, do you get my
I'm not sure. Like I actually recorded a podcast with somebody yesterday, and he didn't sound so good on the podcast, but he sounded great when I took the soundtrack. It was really good. So, but you sound absolutely fine.
How do I recommend your podcast, by the way? It's on Apple, right? So if I just go to Apple and I just give it a review.
Absolutely.
I'm going to do that after this because I haven't done it yet.
Thank you. I'll do the same for you, actually.
You're damn right you will. Hold on a second. Okay, so listen to this. So this music was done by Prince's keyboardist for Purple Rain, Little Red. I mean, whatever. But so this is how I start the show. My name is Eitan Chatayat, and welcome to I'm That podcast, where I get to talk to some pretty incredible people. Some are friends and colleagues, some are clients, and some are people I haven't even met yet. On I'm That, we'll hear from them about who they are, what they do and why, stuff they love or hate, mistakes they've made, victories they've had. They're all known for something, but by the time we're through, the hope is they'll have revealed some things we didn't know about them. Our talk may be deep, profound, funny, who knows really. One thing for sure, it'll be interesting and honest. So if you're up for that, thank you for joining me on I'm That, and here we go.
Very nice.
Pretty swanky, right?
I didn't know you're such a good dancer, Eitan.
You know that I used to be a dancer.
I didn't know that, but I could see that from the funky moves you were making. I was very impressed with that.
I got some funky moves.
I never knew that.
Oh yeah. I almost was a professional modern dancer. I didn't pursue it. I decided to do communications instead. But anyway, this is not about me. This is you. I'm going to read your bio and then let's just jump into it. What do you say?
Yeah, sure.
Guy Spier is a Zurich-based author and investor. And in 2008, Guy made news by bidding $650,000 with his friend Mohnish Pabrai to have a charity lunch with Warren Buffett, which he had, which I hope we'll hear about. His book, The Education of a Value Investor, has sold almost 50,000 copies and has been translated into almost 10 languages. He completed his MBA at the Harvard Business School, class of 93, and holds a first-class degree in politics, philosophy, and economics from Oxford University, where he studied at Brasenose College with the British Prime Minister David Cameron. After completing his MBA, Guy started the Aquamarine Fund, which is an investment vehicle inspired by the original 1950s Buffett partnerships and run with a close replication of the original Buffett partnership rules. The focus is on investing for long-term capital appreciation and capital preservation by running a portfolio of equity investments with the goal of acquiring companies with outstanding long-term economics at a reasonable price and where there is sufficient margin of safety between the company's market price and its intrinsic value. Typical investors include high net worth individuals, family offices, and private banks. Basically, nobody like me. Guy, I'm so happy that you're here on the show. My God, you're going to have to explain everything to me.
Well, it's great to connect with you, Eitan, and thank you for reading that out. I don't think I've looked at that for a very long time, and I might have modified it for you, but it's probably just as well that we didn't, so that's fine.
Well, that's a good start, actually. What would you have modified it to? How have you evolved, guys?
Well, I think I would have de-emphasized the financial bit, and I would have tried to emphasize for you, my creative friend, something that was more in the direction of creative rather than hard-nosed financial, I guess.
Well, you are. The way I see you is hard-nosed financial, but I think what's interesting about you is you've got this whole other side, which, I mean, frankly, I think is, for me, very, very interesting. But before we get into that, I'm just really excited to have you here. And I'd like to start with a traditional question, which I ask, which is actually the name of the podcast. And all I want you to do is just complete the sentence. So if you will, Guy Spier, please complete the sentence. I'm that
father husband, author, and investor. And I can tell you more about that. So, uh, it comes from a conversation that we were having with a group of friends about Benjamin Franklin. And Benjamin Franklin would sign off. You'd love this, Eitan. He'd sign off Benjamin Franklin, comma, printer. Now, he was way more than a printer. He was an American diplomat. He wrote voluminously. He was highly, highly influential. He wrote books, but he kind of could summarize himself as with that simple phrase. And we were talking about it with this group of friends. One of the guys there was a real estate developer, but his career started in landscaping. He actually, amazingly enough, grew up in Cape Cod, Eitan. Maybe I can connect you and your family and his family. And he started off landscaping. And so we agreed, and he just went straight for it. He said to sort of follow that Benjamin Franklin idea, if he had to sign off something, he would sign off his name and then comma landscaper, and I thought that was so lovely. And I have not been able to boil all of that down to something that is more basic than what I just gave you. And so if on Twitter and elsewhere, that's what I write down. And, I've thought it through. So at the end of the day, the most meaningful thing that I've done in life is produce 3 children with my wonderful wife. And so that has to come first. And then I feel like, and you would understand this well, because you're an extraordinary father and family man. So my wife has to come second. So I'm a husband to her second. It's sort of like, and then, and then you sort of play with I'm very proud of the book that I produced. And I'm proud to be an investor. And which goes first, or which is less important? So investor, author, investor. And I cannot boil it down more than that, Eitan. But I would tell you, I have a friend here in Zurich, and he's a professor of mathematics. But there's no question in my mind that his equivalent to that is comma mathematician. So sorry, it's 4 words, not 1. But maybe I'm a work in progress. Maybe we'll get there. And it is a fantastic question, just a fantastic question.
Well, it does make me think when I wrote "I'm That Jew," the whole idea for "I'm That Jew" is, on the surface, that's I'm that Jew, but what does being a Jew mean? And it's actually billions of things. So I actually like your question, and I certainly don't expect people to say one thing, because that would be boring. But I have a question. I mean, I know a lot of our listeners know you. Some don't. I want to ask you about, to kick it off, about you being a father, and you being a wonderful husband to your wife. How does that help you with what it is that you do, for example, in investments? I mean, does it?
I don't think I've ever asked myself the question, and I don't think that that's the reason for doing it. Look, I had a lot of hesitation to get married and to start a family. I got engaged, or we got married, Laurie and I, when I was 37 years old. And I remember at the time that I had a Swedish psychotherapist called Soren. And I'd go and talk to him about, why on earth get married? The world was overpopulated.
It's a good one.
But then, as I have this extraordinary wife who realized that I was a real, I was a piece of work, but she was brave enough to get in there. A lot of women would have looked at me and just said, "Oh, that's just too much to deal with." And it's really through the relationship with her that she and I, we wrote a ketuvah, actually, where, in addition to the traditional text, I don't remember which one, there are my commitments to her and her commitments to me. And it was about starting a family and making a family together. And that's the most important thing. That it took me giving birth to our first child to get that transformation of suddenly realizing how extraordinarily meaningful it is to bring another human onto the planet. And it's the most important thing. I don't think that it matters how it helps investing. I don't know that it does.
Well, I want to challenge you on that for a second, because to me, what I get from you is a very strong set of values. And the reason why I brought it up is because I recently got your annual report for the Aquamarine Fund, which I was, by the way, very impressed by.
That's
Because
just because you like Cece's design, Eitan.
no, not at all. I mean, I do like her design, but that's not the reason. I actually, if you would tell me that I would read an annual report for an investment company, it's just not me. It's just not what I do, and it doesn't interest me. But it's you, so I got it in the mail and I read it, and the design was lovely. But what I found in it was that your values are not between the lines; they are front and center. The integrity, the honesty with which you write to the people that you are speaking to actually really struck me. Now, I know you as a friend, and I've, colleagues, but this is your client base. So I and I see that with your family as well. So I see a parallel, between the way that you are with your clients, which I know nothing about. I'm not a client of yours. Unfortunately, I'm not at that stage yet. And the way that you are with the way that you approach your family.
Yeah, I don't. I think that probably there's just something underlying that flows into both of those things. I don't. It's just. I mean, look. How long ago was it? I read a book by David Hawkins called Power versus Force. And around the same time, I read Mahatma Gandhi's autobiography. And more recently, actually, Jordan Peterson has similar kind of themes in his writing. And actually, Jordan Peterson says it probably really beautifully. He says that when you lie or when you misrepresent reality, you're kind of taking the fabric of reality and you're twisting it. And it can only remain twisted for so long. Sooner or later, it snaps back. By contrast, every time that I've dug deep to kind of be honest with myself, with my wife, with the world, it's paid extraordinary dividends. And so that becomes, I don't know if I can't say it becomes addictive, because it's so freaking painful to do every time.
Well, it's interesting that you bring up Jordan Peterson. I read his book, The 12 Rules. And actually a guest on the show, Rose McGowan, who I think who's already been showcased on the show. People will have already heard her interview. But I sent her, as we were getting to know each other, something that struck me about her is her commitment to truth. And Jordan Peterson said something, which I sent her, which was, if you want an adventure, tell the truth. Boy, what an adventure that is.
Yeah.
I love that quote.
Yeah, it's and he's right. And we're all so afraid of doing it because we really don't know what the consequences will be. And the first time it happened for me, so out of business school, I went and made a very bad choice in terms of where I was going to work. I kind of it damaged my reputation and made me probably unemployable for a while. But I decided I was going to write about it in this book. And it was a really scary thing because anybody reading it could have easily come to the conclusion that they didn't want to have anything to do with me because I showed some really flawed moral judgment. And when I realized that I was going to put myself on the line with that chapter and actually send that to the publisher, that in a certain way is when the adventure of my life began. And and in motivating for me in that was, it's and I urge you, I feel bad because I've said this multiple times in public places, but I'm going to tell you as well. Mahatma Gandhi's autobiography is not a long book, and within the first 60 pages he tells you that as a devout Hindu he ate meat, and that he consorted with prostitutes. And this is his autobiography, and this man is a hero of India. And, and the subtitle to the book is A Story of My Experimentations with the Truth. And so, and I just going back to Jordan Peterson for a second, I have not read the unabridged version of Solzhenitsyn's book, and the name escapes me right now, but what Solzhenitsyn says is that the terrors and the horrible things that occurred under Stalinism and in the USSR happened because individual citizens accepted untruths and they participated in a system of untruth. And so there's an incredible moral force in being honest. And I would tell you that letter, just to bring it back to that annual report, is so funnily enough, I have a friend, William Green, who normally helps me edit those letters. And he was in the midst of publishing his own book. And so he was very, very busy. He didn't have a lot of time. And so I'd used him in the last few years as a bit of a crutch for helping me write my letters. And this year I was far more on my own. And writing that letter, it took me the best part of a month. And it's certainly, since I wrote the book, one of the most painful things that I've done. And it's just this strange thing that when you commit yourself to being brutally honest with the world, it's both extraordinarily satisfying and an amazing adventure at the same time, because you get responses like Eitan Chitayat, who comes out of the blue, who never reads Guy's annual report and wants to bring it up.
Well, I mean, I think it's a lonely journey. I mean, you know me and what I stand for, not just with my branding agency and how we push clients to reach their truth and we challenge them, but you've seen some of the stuff that I've done. But it's a lonely journey.
Yeah.
And what I find, and I definitely want to take your, I definitely want to get your take on this, which is where the world is going right now, and the inability for people to be able to speak openly for fear of judgment. And it's something that really bothers me. And I don't know if it bothers you.
I think that it doesn't bother me because I'm actually not affected in the slightest in my personal life by it. You can challenge me and we can try, but I don't think there's anywhere where I feel uncomfortable expressing what I feel strongly about and believe. I read about people who are cancelled, for example, and that is horrible. But I get concerned about myself because there's an element of political participation which is projecting your own desires and dreams and anger onto others rather than fixing your own life. And so I try not to do too much of that because it really does not impact me personally at all. And so maybe maybe it should bother me more than it does. What I would also say is that I believe in the power of good to overcome these things. And I believe that it will burn itself out naturally in the same way that, I spent the best part of 2 decades getting all bent out of shape about the ways in which Israel was distorted in the international press. And it's still distorted. But what has been revealed by the Abraham Accords is it was all garbage because some smart people in the Emirates and elsewhere figured out that this was a bunch of lies that was being sold by some people with an agenda, and they saw through it and they said we're going to allow those to stop us from making peace and having commerce with one of the most successful other countries in the region. And so I think that sometimes these things can collapse on themselves in the same way that the Soviet Union did. And so I'm hoping that this kind of like woke cancel culture will quite soon actually collapse on itself.
Well, that's the big question, isn't it? I mean, I agree with you about the cancel culture and how at some stage the truth is revealed. The problem is how much damage does it do in the meantime? What's being destroyed in the process? You said you don't feel it, and I buy that. And I think that you're in a great position for it not to let it affect you. But let's talk about your children, for example, in school, or our children. They're out there and there are certain things that are unpopular to say. There are places that you can't go in a conversation for fear of being ridiculed and outcast, as opposed to it being an all-inclusive conversation, whether it's on the right or the left. And I'm not talking about Democrats and Republicans. I'm talking about like in any country that you live in right now. There's this trend. And I don't know about you, man. It really bothers me. As much as it doesn't affect you personally,
You know, it's look, I am not a particularly political animal. Having said that, I do watch politics a lot in areas that interest me. Um, and you know, so not that I've read a lot of her work, but somebody who's highly articulate, Barry Weiss, who's certainly not, you know, she's not on the right of the political spectrum. She used to be a staff writer for the New York Times. She resigned in a very public way for exactly this kind of reason, where she said, I refuse to muzzle myself
sure.
and to know that I can't publish or write certain things for fear of. I think that maybe if we go historically, the fact of the matter is there's been long periods of history where one way or another there were things that you were not allowed to say or do, whether you know you weren't allowed to offend the king of the country that you were in, or you were not allowed to offend the church of the country that you were in. And so that's something that's been with me, humanity, for a long time. And the ability to think freely is something that you and I want the whole population to have. And the fact of the matter is, through most periods of history, the people who've been able to think freely have either been protected by being, you know, prophets living in caves in the mountains, or being in some seminary, or some other protective coat which protects their freedom to think freely. And I don't think that, you know, we have Jordan Peterson and we have many people like him. And so I think that ultimately outweighs all of the non-free thinking, if you like. And I think that it's just, I mean, what I would say is, if you choose to pick to fight that battle yourself, it better be a worthwhile battle for you to fight. And I'd like to believe that if it impinged on me, I would fight the battle, and I wouldn't just sit on the side and watch.
You know, the most challenging thing is that these non-free thinkers don't think that they're non-free thinkers. That's the irony. That's
Yeah,
the biggest challenge.
I mean, I haven't come across them much. And it's funny, we brought up Jordan Peterson. So I've watched various debates between Jordan Peterson and these people who insist on the use of the correct pronouns and claim that Jordan Peterson is a hate monger for saying that he doesn't want compelled speech. I think that, you know, I'm not trying to defend their position. I disagree with their position, but put yourself in the place of somebody who is a mediocre thinker at best. They're a lecturer or similar at a university, and you know, like so many people, what they actually want to do is put food on the table, and they would far prefer to be in an environment where they can honestly publish and think what they think without fear of retribution. But when your position and your family's well-being and your ability to pay the rent is dependent on you saying the right things or censoring yourself in certain ways, and by the way, somebody in that position does not want to confess to you, Eitan, privately that actually they're engaging in extraordinarily, you know, demeaning moral compromise. They would like to find every opportunity to believe that what they're doing is utterly moral and right. And I'm not saying that it's the most noble aspect of humanity that we're observing there, but it is an aspect of humanity, and it's an understandable aspect of humanity. I don't always ask myself, but seeing as you bring the topic up, can I really say that if I had been living in Soviet Russia, that I would have stood up for the truth? Or would I just quietly put my head down and gone along? I mean, I think that I think I'm most likely to have put my head down and gone along. So can we get upset at other people who do the same thing? I think that what we should do is really celebrate and be grateful for the people who are willing to stand up. And, you know, bringing up Soviet Russia, this, I actually don't know the history of Shimon Bar Yochai as well as I ought to probably, but it seems to me that the way he stood up to the Romans at the time is not dissimilar to the way Alexei Navalny, and it's an extraordinary mind because it's somebody who says, I don't care about my life. If I am not free to express myself, if Navalny is not free to be a free Russian, he's not afraid of death. He's not afraid of torture. And I think that Shimon Bar Yochai was a similar kind of guy. And there's, we celebrate them. I mean, how many 100,000 people showing up at his grave 2,000 years or so after he lived. And how amazing with Alexei Navalny that we have somebody of that stature in our midst today who's still alive. And let's not get upset about the people who are just ordinary human beings. And let's just celebrate the ones who are extraordinary, Yeah.
Well said. I want to shift gears. I want to shift. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. No. It's yeah.
Because we can talk about this all night.
And look, I have to tell you that, the reason why this topic resonates with you, Eitan, is that you went and did that with the "I'm That Jew" video. That was not dissimilar moment for you to Jordan Peterson saying, "No, I will not engage in compelled speech. Nobody's going to tell me as a matter of law what I can or cannot say, if I can or cannot use certain personal pronouns." You at some point said, you know what? I mean, I remember it started off with, forgive me for the colorful language, I just motherfuckered you off my Facebook page. And then you did that "I'm That Jew," and you were stood up and you said, I don't care what the world thinks of me after this video. This is what I'm going to say. And it was an act of freedom, actually. It was an act of throwing off shackles and saying, I will not kowtow to what you expect me to be. I will not be your friend if you spew hate and things that I know not to be true. I don't know if you're ready to go and engage in a hunger strike and get the awful treatment that Alexei Navalny is getting, but you stood up for the truth,
Well, thank you. It was just an expression, but what was interesting about that whole experience was the response that it got. I still, to this day, I forget about the 10 million views and everything, but to this day, I still receive every day many, many emails and messages of people who feel the same way. I actually think that after this, if you haven't heard it already, you need to go and listen to the Rose McGowan interview, because I mean, her book, which I highly recommend you read, guys, called Brave. And it's not because of the experience that she's quite well known for, what she went through, the hardships of her life, but it's what she's doing now and standing up and freely expressing at a great personal cost, whether you agree with her or not, whether one likes her or not, she's expressing her truth. And I do respect that. I want to hear about this Warren Buffett lunch and Warren Buffett, because I know a lot of my listeners have not heard that story before. And I don't think, besides the book, which I've read, but I've never talked about it with you. So I'd love to hear it. And I'd also like to say that for anyone who has not read The Education of a Value Investor by Guy Spier, look it up on Amazon and pick it up. It's a great book. But yeah, what was Warren Buffett like? What was that all about?
Just to rewind just a second, when you published "I'm That Jew," that was the beginning of an extraordinary adventure for you that is still taking place. And I think if there's anything to take away from that segment is, don't be afraid. If you speak truth, amazing things will happen.
Let's stop talking about me, though.
The story of the Buffett launch is another kind of an adventure, which started really for me because I committed myself to writing thank you notes. And I'd figured out, I wanted success, didn't know how to get there, and thought that for as long as I didn't know how to get there, writing thank you notes seemed to be a good idea. It certainly worked for this famous car salesperson who was the most successful car salesperson at the time. His name escapes me, but he's written about by Robert Cialdini in this book called The Psychology of Influence. And so, every time I wouldn't let myself leave the office every day until I'd written 3 thank you notes, which, worked out at five a week. And one of the notes that I wrote was to this guy, Mohnish Pabrai, whose annual meeting that I attended. And he's got an extraordinarily unusual and original mind. He's actually the subject of the first chapter of this book by my friend William Green, Richer, Wiser, Happier. And a friendship developed. That friendship would never have developed without the thank you notes. And
What is, if I may, just what does Mohnish actually do?
So Mohnish is an investor just like me. He runs a similar kind of fund. He's an inspiration for many younger generations of investors. And he's also a philanthropist in that his foundation is in the midst of educating. It's educated so far about 2,000 underprivileged Indians to help them go to some of the most elite Indian universities and schools. And so he's an investor. He's an immigrant to the United States. He came to the United States with nothing, literally. And he's now an extraordinarily wealthy man who's committed to giving his money away over time while he continues to invest. And he proposed to me the idea of bidding on the launch with Warren Buffett. But his take on it was so extraordinarily different to mine. And I admired and adulated Warren Buffett, but never thought that I would, quote, pay for a lunch with Warren Buffett. But he helped me to see it differently. And, I decided to take the risk and to be 1/3 of his bid. And the idea was that he would bring his wife and 2 daughters, and I would bring my wife. Our children were too young really to participate. And we bid the first year and did not get it, but we bid the second year and did get it. And I didn't really know what to expect other than that he brought to it some very special insights. So he'd observed and understood who Warren Buffett was, and he'd figured out that rather than make it into a quid pro quo, we're paying for lunch and you're going to deliver value type of deal, it was going to be an opportunity for us to thank him for everything that he'd taught us. And the experience was an extraordinary experience. And it's been a gift that continues to give to me in all sorts of ways to this day. And, many lessons from that whole experience. One of the benefits to me was a friendship with Mohnish Pabrai. Another benefit was the understanding. Well, one is that the idea that all people are equal, they're not. There are extraordinary people. And if you admire an extraordinary person, it is worth getting in the room with them if you possibly can. And so I learned a lot from being in the room with Warren Buffett. I also learned that if there's somebody that I admire, it's worth investing my time, energy, and resources to get into the same room as them. It's going to make me a better person.
$650,000.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I heard everything that you just said, but I'm stuck on that figure. Where does that money go?
Yeah.
And how does one justify is the wrong word, because you've explained what you got and it's the gift that keeps giving.
Yeah.
But for us normal people, $650,000, can you please explain that money goes to him and he gives it to a charity?
So the morning after we've won the bid, we're so excited we've won the bid. And this was a kind of like, it was run pretty much as if it's off eBay. I think they used a different service, but now the first thing I'm worried about is that they don't think I'm good for the money. So I wire off my portion of it, which is about $250,000, directly to the Glide Foundation in San Francisco. The Glide Foundation is a charity that helps people who are down and out in San Francisco. And Warren Buffett's then or now deceased wife was a huge benefactor to that charity. And it was a kind of a way for Warren Buffett of honoring his wife to continue to support that charity through this charity lunch. So what's really important is that the money didn't go to Warren Buffett. He wasn't selling lunch with anyone. He was supporting a charity by offering to auction off a lunch with him, but the money went directly to the charity. And one thing that I did, because I wanted the gift to be a real gift. So it wouldn't have been a very real gift if I'd not interested myself in the charity. So I went and visited the Glide Foundation and met the leader of the Glide Foundation at the time and saw what they were doing and found out about it, and sort of was happy to be a part of that. So that was a real part for me of sort of donating. And I wanted to visit the charity before I had the lunch with Warren. So it's important to, and one of the things that was convincing for me with Mohnish was that he said, how many people give money to charity, to a university or to some other endowment, or and they don't get free lunch with anyone, you know? They just get their, they just get their name on a plaque or a thank you in an annual report. Or he said, this is like, you get to donate money and you get to hang out. But Mohnish had also done his research, and his research had shown that not in all cases, and no obligation on Warren's part, but that in some cases, these people became friends with Warren and they hung out with him after the lunch. And so for Mohnish, and again, Mohnish is an Indian immigrant to the United States. He came to the United States when he was 17 or 18 years old. I think that often immigrants see things that people who grew up in the country don't. And he kind of saw a way, he had not gone to an elite university. He was not an insider in any way, shape, or form. But he could also see that Warren was not somebody who put much credit in these kind of systems of hierarchy that developed mainly in the northeast of the United States, but that Warren didn't much respect that and wasn't a part of that. And he saw a way to develop a direct relationship to Warren Buffett through that lunch. And so I don't think that Mohnish would have been as enthusiastic to bid on some charity lunch. It was the fact that it was with this particular personality.
What's he like, Mr. Buffett? What's he like?
There's the famous story of the tailor who visits the Pope, and his family afterwards want to find out what the Pope was like, and does the Pope believe in transubstantiation, or and the tailor says, well, he's about a size 6, so to the tailor. I mean, so one of the most difficult things for me at that lunch was to see that Warren's brain operates at a higher clock speed, I believe, to mine. So I've been around plenty of highly, highly intelligent people, and I feel like I've got a good sense of when I feel like self-assessment, my brain operates at a similar clock speed, or when I'm around somebody. And I have no doubt that after having sat in a room with him, I feel like I feel like he's operating on 3 different tracks at the same time. And talking to him, it was like, I would say something and I could see his brain going, oh, I see. He's made that move in the conversation. And he was kind of, as I was talking, was plotting out the 8 different places where the conversation would go, a bit like a grandmaster chess player who, and I've had conversations. Alice Schroeder, who wrote a biography of Buffett called The Snowball, has I've said that to her, and she said yes, she's had the same experience, and other people do. At the end of he spent 3.5 hours with us, and at the end of that lunch, we were exhausted, or I was exhausted. Warren was energetic and bouncing up and down and ready to go to the next thing. So one very important experience was just raw intelligence sitting there, and the recognition that whatever raw intelligence Warren had, I had less of it. And, Warren, he always jokes and says that to be a successful investor, you probably need an IQ of 120, but you don't need a genius IQ of 160. To which my response is, that's great, Warren. I'll take all of those 40 IQ points and you can give them to me, because I need every single one of them. You think you can give them away? Sure. Of course, there's no freely tradable market in IQ points. So that was an important experience. I think that the other experience was just that, so here's an interesting vignette. And then I'll come back to, I'll let you ask the next question, which for anybody who's interested is on the tip of Eitan's tongue. So I did send Warren
How do you know that? I'm just listening.
Yeah, just write it down, Eitan. I know how hard this is for you. But so we'd sent Warren a bio of me and Laurie. So I'm very proud of my interesting background, having been, born in South Africa and lived in Israel and Iran and the UK, and I think this is super fascinating and interesting for Warren Buffett. And Laurie, my wife, was born in Salisbury, North Carolina. It so happens that Warren Buffett's one of his closest childhood friends is from Salisbury, North Carolina. So when we meet, Warren looks straight past me, goes straight to Laurie and says, I know Salisbury, North Carolina. Tell me about Salisbury, the Salisbury that you know. And, it was sort of like I was a little crestfallen because I thought that he had to be super interested in me and my fascinating, multicolored, multinational background. And so, at his core, he's a Midwesterner. He's a Midwesterner through and through. And there's a certain kind of simplicity with which he sees life, which is that sort of Midwestern simplicity. And so, those are a couple of the lessons. But yeah, back to you.
I have two questions right now. The first one is I want to talk a little bit about your book because I think it's great. And a lot of people think it's great. In fact, when you and I have hosted our Clubhouse chats, I'm amazed at you have fans. I mean, you literally have fans. They all of a sudden there's like a couple of hundred people in the room like that, and they're all asking you questions about finance. So I want to ask you one about your book, and what do you think is, from your perspective, the takeaway that you want people to have from your book? And the other question that I have is more personal about your book.
I'll dive into the first, and then for anybody who's interested, Eitan started looking away, and I was not sure whether you're trying to remember or whether you were worried about. You can ask me any question, Eitan. Nothing's impossible.
I might just because you're being so cheeky, I might just publish this as a video chat, and people can see your fleece jumpsuit. No, I think slowly, and we talked about this once when we talked about silence, like to stop and think. There's no rush. So I stop sometimes and I look away and I think about but I do know the question that I have. Sometimes it's about how I'm going to phrase it. But no, the first question.
Yeah. Just to riff on that for a second is that we've had plenty of meals together and we've had plenty of conversations together. I've never brainstormed with you, Eitan. I wonder what it would be like to brainstorm with you, because that's a side of your personality that I haven't seen, that sort of the person who looks away and thinks. And that's beautiful. And I have a terrible tendency to want to dive into every pause with yet more words. And
what's interesting is that people look at me and see a creative, like all these ideas, all these films, all these articles, or the branding agency, all of that stuff, or the social activism that I do. I don't think that my strength is my creativity. I think my strength is my strategic thinking. I'm very strategic, and there are plenty of creative people who are infinitely better than I am. But I think a lot. I do. I think a lot. But again, this isn't about me. It's about you, your book, and what it is.
The takeaway is this.
Yeah. What is the takeaway?
See, here's what happens to me. I have this horrible career sort of mistake that is extraordinarily damaging. So I go to work after business school for a place that looks not dissimilar to the brokerage firm in Wolf of Wall Street. I was a greedy Gordon Gekko type. I went to work for somebody who made me into vice president right out of business school, gave me a nice looking business card, told me to go do deals. And over the ensuing 18 months, I discover quite how sleazy this place is, robbing widows and orphans effectively. Not a pleasant place to work. And when I left finally, and I was there for 18 months, and I left 18 months minus 2 days too late. People looked at me and they said, one of two things are possible. Either this guy was too stupid to understand the kind of games that this brokerage firm was playing, or he understood and was willing to participate. Either way, the intelligent choice is to have nothing to do with him. So I felt, it's funny. So in the Macbeth play, you have Macbeth's wife who wants to wash the blood off her hands, and she just can't wash the blood off. She's trying desperately. And I felt that this stench of awful Wall Street behavior had stuck to me, and nothing that I could do could wash me clean of it. And that was not a nice place to be. And I was also, in a way that you would probably understand, I was so full of, so a combination of a career mess up with the arrogance of somebody who's got this elite education. And, these two things just were not, there was an enormous cognitive dissonance. How can you be the product of this elite education and at the same time have done such a major F up? And so I kind of had to go back to the drawing board. I didn't realize that that was what I was doing at the time. And going back to the drawing board was all about finding the wisdom that my elite education had not given me. And it involved going to motivational seminars, and it involved reading a lot of self-help books, and it involved an enormous amount of psychotherapy. And and it was around that time that I started writing thank you notes. I started doing all sorts of things which I would have thought with my elite education were beneath me before I'd suffered this massive career fall. And then I started getting some success and things started going well again. It took about a decade. But then what was so interesting for me was that people started attributing any success that I was getting to things like my elite education. And I wanted to say time and again, I would say, no, it's got nothing to do with that. If anything, that's a handicap. It's got to do with all these other things. And by the way, all these other things are things that you can do too, even if you didn't attend an elite university. And that was kind of, I decided that it was the best thing to do was to write a book about it. And I started realizing that there are so many business careers that one sees and that books are written about. And these people only want to highlight the successes. And, if you're writing your own story, it's very easy to hide the failures and to hide the bits that you don't want people to learn about and read. And I thought, how good would it be if I was to actually put that front and center? And so that was the motivation. And I think that, so hopefully, and I think it is the case that the people who read it and like it, they feel liberated because the takeaway from the book is, well, if that schmuck can do it, then so can I. And this person has actually revealed to me all the awful mistakes that he made and all the ways in which he was not a master of the universe. And he's managed to pull something out of it. So hopefully I can do the same thing. And that's what draws people into it, I think. And it's written as a kind of a hero's journey. So, we start off in the belly of the beast. The belly of the beast, in my case, is this firm D.H. Blair, and with an enormous amount of self-loathing and hate of myself and what I've become. And then the story is how I dug myself out of that with the ups and downs and the setbacks and the successes. And so it's a story of kind of redemption, if you like, but real life redemption.
Well, your favorite word in the world is extraordinary. In fact, you use it all the time, and I love it about you. This is an extraordinary book, and I really think that people should read it. It's not what you expect, and it's great. My other question was, what's your favorite band today? And there you thought that I was going to ask you some deep intellectual question, but actually it was about music.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think that I have to say that it's REM.
Really?
Yeah, REM just gets me somewhere in a place where there's something very real about I don't know the name of the lead singer and his vocals.
Michael Stipe.
And
Michael Stipe.
Yeah, and it's funny because I don't follow music that closely, but I think that there's just a raw honesty for me to their lyrics, and I would have loved to have attended one of their concerts. I think that, yeah.
I think if you would have attended one of their concerts, you would have been in the corner, maybe in the spotlight.
It's put me in the spotlight. You're quoting the lyrics back to me.
Took you a second. Listen, I had to fuck with you a little. What are you good at, Guy? Like,
that's me in the spotlight.
Exactly. Yeah. I'm not going to edit that. I'm going to keep that right in there.
Do you think that I'm a shiny, happy person?
Oh, you're very shiny. You're very shiny and very happy.
Do you think it's me who's lost my religion, or have you lost yours?
You're totally losing your religion now. All right, my next question
But
is this.
sorry, while we're at it,
Yeah,
one of my favorite songs of theirs is Imitation of Life. And I don't know, it speaks to me on a very deep level. So
I actually don't know that song. I will check it out.
I will send it to you.
Okay. So
That's
I was going to
hilarious.
say, what are you good at and what do you suck at? What you suck at is not recognizing in the moment that I'm taking the piss because you didn't get the whole lyrics thing. So that's the question answered there. But like on a serious note, what do you? What's one of the redeeming qualities that you have that you know that you are better? You know that you are good at
Yeah,
this.
it's such a great question. And it came the first time I saw somebody get asked and answer that question. Just stop me if you already know this or it's hackneyed. But for me, it's an interview that I saw with Sting, the
Mm,
lead singer of the Police. And he kind of puts his hand up and he stops the questioner and he says, look, yeah, I play the bass guitar and I think he also plays normal guitar. He says, I'm a pretty good musician. But he tells the question, he says, you know what I can really do? I can sing. I know I do that really well. And that's something that I really excel at. And, I would tell you that I think that the thing that I've been, I'm really good at is learning languages. I
mm.
love learning languages. I've got enormous, exhilarating fun out of learning languages. And this is, call it what you will. I figured out around 18 years old that, learning languages and being good at it, the very best thing that you could do was become a simultaneous translator. And I didn't think of that as being much of a career. And so I was pretty quick to discard it, actually. And actually, I'm somebody, for good or for bad, who was very able to discard all sorts of things that might have been interesting and fun because I was interested in getting financial security. And I felt like it was really important to win at that game for me. And I think that I admire many artists and people who say who are not cowed by fear over financial security and they pursue something that is closer to extraordinary passion and joy. And in a certain way, those are not the decisions. I don't regret them, and I don't apologize for them. It's just a reflection of somebody who has my configuration of fears over financial insecurity and abilities. But what I'm really good at is learning languages.
And what excites you? Like what turns you on?
These days, uh, it comes at a really interesting time for me because I think that for the first time, by my own standards, I think by many people's standards, I was financially secure a long time ago. But by my own standards, I'm financially secure. And what excites me really is figuring out exactly what the higher purpose is, because I think that to compound wealth for the sake of compounding wealth and becoming the richest guy on the planet or the richest guy in your town or however else you want to describe it is an asinine goal because money is just money. It's just spending power. And when you have enough of it, there's a diminishing return to having more of it. If you've got more than enough oxygen that you can breathe in a lifetime, how much sense would it make to collect oxygen tax of yet more oxygen? You can't consume it. So what's the point? And I think that I get really excited about improving the lives of people around me and improving the prospects of people around me. So the thing that excited me the most over the last week or two, you would love this, Eitan. So it's actually you're part of the story. So I'm kind of spending a lot of time on Clubhouse, and a couple of Saudi Arabian guys get in touch with me and ask me if I'd like to be on their podcast. And so I do something that I've done more and more of now. So I have a group of investor friends who gather together in a conference every winter here in the mountains in Klosters called Value X. And one of them is a Saudi guy. So I tell these Saudi podcasters, I'll be happy to go on your show, but before I go on your show, would you like to invite this guy onto your show? And then I'll go on your show. So it's kind of saying this won't mean as much to me as it'll mean to this Saudi friend who's just starting off in his career. He's about 10 years behind me in his career.
Mm.
And I offer them two options. I say, look, one option is that he goes first and then I'll go afterwards. And I've done that multiple times where I say, I'll go on your podcast show, but you need to interview these three friends first. And I get to offer them a second option, which is that we go on the show together. So we go on the show together, and Aziz is kind of nervous because he feels like he's got somebody who's more experienced, better known than he is in the industry, what's going to happen. And I actually take significant amounts of time in the podcast to make sure that our hosts, and therefore the listeners of the podcast, know that Aziz is a great guy. He gets it and he's doing good work. So before the show, he had 5,000 Twitter followers, and it's now 9,500. It jumped. The video of the show has gone above 7,000 views. Not that I'm checking every 5 minutes or anything. And the idea that little intervention by me has significantly accelerated his career path is something that is just super exciting for me. And I think that, Warren Buffett has this story that he tells about some guy who died. Well, and all these people go to his funeral. And, somebody hearing the story says, all these people went to his funeral, but he was hated, and the response is, yes, they all wanted to see that he was actually dead. You don't want to be that person. By contrast, and I joke with this friend. He says, "Oh, I need to thank you," and I tell him, "No problem. When you buy your luxury yacht, just invite me onto it. That'll be fine. You don't want to own a luxury yacht. You want to have friends who have luxury yachts." And then I responded to him one thing further, which was, actually, you don't have to invite me onto your luxury yacht. Why don't we just get a shawarma together on the Edgware Road? Because he lives in London, that will be fine. But I think that idea that, an intervention, finding places in the world where an intervention can actually significantly accelerate somebody's life, is just something that is extraordinarily exciting. And again, what I tell you, Eitan, is that that's something I learned from Warren Buffett. Warren Buffett does that all the time for all sorts of people in all sorts of ways.
Well, having known you for a number of years, I can tell you that on a personal level, I felt that from you. And I know that I personally know a lot of other people that you have done that for. And it's the small things that you do, and it's felt. I have another question. What's something that Laurie doesn't know about you?
Just to go back to the previous question is...
That's right. Buy some time, Guy.
Exactly. So Charlie Munger, Warren Buffett's partner, says this, which is just, again, just this extraordinarily powerful idea, is if you want to get successful, why don't you go about deserving that success? So that when you get there, people will look at you and say, he really deserves it. So the last thing you want is to have any measure of success and people to say he doesn't deserve that. So go set about deserving it. And in that, I'm a very premature work in progress. I think there's a lot more than I can do. But so on to your other question, something about me that Laurie doesn't know. Well, I think that she's realizing it now, but Laurie used to think that I was humoring her when I'd bring her emails and sort of like messages that I wanted to write, interactions with people, and I'd consult with her. She thought that I was kind of just trying to be nice. And I think she still doesn't realize how much I value her opinion and insights. And Laurie is, I don't think, I have this kind of analytical training. And, the realization for me that I have in my life, somebody who doesn't have analytical training, but she has insights into people's personalities that I will never have. and she still assumes that I'll get it. And I think that what she doesn't realize is that I will never get it. It's just not my
Never,
strength.
never.
So that's something that, that's something she
That's
doesn't
actually
know about me.
that's a good answer to a difficult question. And Laurie is a phenomenal woman. She really is. I've
Yeah.
just firsthand, having stayed with your family and gotten to know your family as a mother, as a partner to you, and also what I experienced when you put together that TED Talk and how she managed things. She's a people person,
Yeah.
and she's a person that operates from the gut in many ways. I'm a big fan. I want to do one more thing before we wrap, and that is to ask you a series of questions where you're not allowed to waffle on. It's just like staccato kind of bing bang boom questions, okay? And you,
They call it a quick fire round,
yeah, is that what they call it? I don't know what I'm doing.
something like that. You're doing great, Eitan.
I don't know what I'm doing. Burger King or McDonald's?
McDonald's.
Black or blue?
Blue.
Paris or Berlin?
Tough. That's my answer. Tough.
Okay.
Paris.
Paris. Oh, okay. So you changed it to Paris. Okay. The Beatles or the Rolling Stones?
Beatles.
Charlie Brown or Garfield?
Charlie Brown.
Mac or PC?
PC, man.
Really?
Yeah.
Love or money?
Love.
There was a hesitation. There was a hesitation.
I didn't hear it.
Yeah. Maybe
This hesitation was he seriously asking me this?
Sometimes it's like an immediate, love, but sometimes people think about it. And one more question, which is not a quick fire, but just to really wrap up a conversation that I've thoroughly enjoyed. One thing about you, Guy, that I love is I always love our conversations, but you have the most soothing voice and that accent. And I get accent comments all the time because I've got this weird accent, but you really are a pleasure to listen to. So I've really enjoyed the conversation. What's coming next for you? What are you looking forward to?
So first of all, if my voice sounds good, it's because I've got this awesome dynamic Heil PR mic, and it makes a difference. I joke. People think that it's the content of what you have to say. No, it's just the quality of the mic and the quality of the sound. And for what it's worth, Eitan, these podcasts, you kind of go to a very personal place with the listener. You're in their ear often. You're with them jogging when they can't sleep at night or in their car. It's a really wonderful, wonderful medium. It's a real privilege to be able to share that space with anyone. And what's next for me is, of course, there I was buying time. There's a book by, his last name is Siegel. It's a series of books, and he's an oncologist. And what he wanted to, it's about people, I don't know why I picked up these books, but it's for people who are fighting cancer. And his claim in at least one of the books was that if you focused on the cancer was sometimes, for some people, actually the opportunity to be free to choose what you actually wanted to do all along with your life. Because now that there was a potential death sentence, you had no excuse but to follow what you actually wanted to be. And he had stories of people who were lawyers who went and became artists. And this idea of making the world beautiful and continuing to grow a garden of opportunity and to continue to see around me people who hopefully whose lives have been made better by my presence and intervention is something that is hugely exciting and motivating for me. So to give one example, I have a niece who's totally capable of going to Rice University, and I really want to be the catalyst that makes her go there because she can. and I know that will make a huge difference. And that's just exciting for me to look up, to look forward to a world in 20 years' time where my life is just full of people whose lives were improved by my presence in it is just an awesome result if I can get there. And the only thing that I would tell you is that I'm not a particularly good organizer, and I don't particularly enjoy people who are do-good virtue signalers. And I think that we have a lot of them, and it's very hard to criticize them because at the end of the day, they are doing good or claiming to do good. And so they kind of build this wall around them where you can't actually critique, because to critique would be, and I know a few people personally who I kind of despise them in a certain way because they're so good at virtue signaling, but they're actually not very nice people in their personal lives. By contrast, and again, Warren Buffett is such a great example. He and Charlie Munger are extraordinary people in their personal lives. I have had personal experience. I know stories of people who've been touched in such profound ways. And, if you happen to be able to, cure the world of malaria or something, that's also great. But what's really great is to have, as a friend of mine put, maybe this is the summary of it, to have the love of a beautiful woman and the respect of honorable men. And obviously one could, if that was written at a time that was more, sort of, we could take this sort of sexual differences out of that, and to say the love of a beautiful partner and the respect of honorable people, I think is an extraordinary goal for life.
I think that's a great place to end. Guy Spier, my friend, you're a good father, you're a good husband, you're a good man. Thank you so much for taking the time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Eitan. And you are an amazing interviewer. You are an absolute natural at this. Thank you for doing it. You extracted so much juice out of this interview. Good job. Thank you.
Well, that's it. Thanks for listening to I'm That Podcast. Go ahead and subscribe to the show on iTunes. And if you'd like, leave a rating and review. Tune in for the next episode, and see you soon.